Association and all that we do here. So I see a lot of our friends here tonight, but I also want to make a little pitch for help in the future. Now that we have this place, we need to run it and bring more programs like this to you. So please take a little gift bag on your way out and help us continue with all the efforts that we have been doing. And I'm going to turn it over to Joe because we've got quite a program for you tonight.
Good evening, everyone. Pleasure to be here. Exciting to go over these three great Grand National horses from Maryland that you should all be proud of. I wanted to start with a quote from my favorite historian, David McCullough, who says, "The fundamental error people make when they think about history is that things had to turn out the way they did. We forget that the characters involved don't know how things will turn out." And we'll sort of see that throughout the night, that so many of these careers of horses and riders could have gone the other direction, but through perseverance and grit, they came together. It didn't have to go that way. We're excited tonight. We have Richard Pittman, who he was a commentator for 37 years on the BBC. He's very famous in England. I don't know if we have it, if he can hear us yet.
Yep, I can hear you.
Ah, Richard. Everyone say hello to Richard. So, Richard, I'm going to just give a little introduction to you. So, Richard, besides being a great steeplechase jockey and a commentator and a best-selling author, things didn't always look so rosy for Richard. And we're going to just jump back to when Richard his sister Pam, decided that Richard maybe wasn't that good at other sports and maybe he should try riding a pony. So, Richard, you may remember this, but Pam woke him up at 6 o'clock in the morning, and up the road they went about 3 miles on the bicycle, and so Richard got on a pony, it was a pretty fierce pony named Honey Bunches. And Richard rode Honey Bunches every day for the first couple of days, and she would say, "Richard, prepare to trot." She was riding her bicycle and leading Richard along, and Richard would beautifully post up and down, and everything was going great until day 3, and she said, "Richard, prepare to canter," at which point Richard dove off the pony on the side of the road. And that happened for the next 2 days, where Richard dove off the pony every time Pam said, "Richard, prepare to canter." Finally, on the 4th day, she decides that she's not going to announce that prepare to canter. She's just going to disconnect Honey Bunches and slap him on the ass. Honey Bunches took off, and Richard has been riding ever since and went on to decide he wanted to be a steeplechase jockey. So we'll fast forward to Fred Winter's yard, and Richard shows up, and he's got his farmer gum boots on, and his pants are a little too tight. He's sort of freckle-faced, and not unlike what he looks like today. Freckle-faced, and he's got a crew cut in those days. And he shows up at Fred Winter's barn, and he's there, and he's been a steeplechase jockey by this time for 4 years. So that's, life of a steeplechase jockey in England is pretty brutal. You're driving through the rain all over the country, and he's ridden 60 races, and he's ridden 0 winners. And so Fred Winter looks at him, and you can correct me later or not, Richard. Fred Winter looks at him and says, "Well, you'll never be champion jockey, but you'll do for now," because he didn't have any other employees. So the reason this is all important is because at about that moment, Jay Trump arrives at Fred Winter's yard. So Jay Trump's going to be the first horse that Fred Winter ever trains, and Richard is there. But Richard's not that worried about Jay Trump, because on the first day that Jay Trump is finally going to run, and he's going to run at Sandown, and so the governor is going with Tommy Smith and Jay Trump to Sandown. But Richard has a more important objective. He's finally got his first live ride on a horse called 177. And so this is great. And so, Fred Winter's a little preoccupied, of course, with going down the road with Jay Trump. But he says to Richard, he gives him some instructions. "Look, Richard, this is," and he's a man of few words, so he probably said this in 2 words. But anyway, he says, "Richard, you're sitting on a very live horse. All you have to do is get him covered up. Don't show him any daylight until you see the last fence, and win handily, and we'll see you at the end of the day." So Richard goes to the races. Everything's going great. 177 goes down to the start. They drop the flag, and Richard is 5 lengths to drift behind on 177. Everything's great until about 3 strides later, after the start. All of a sudden, 177 throws his head up for no reason and looks back at Richard and bolts straight past the entire field. So now he is going around and they make a slight left-hand turn to get to the first fence. And by this time, Richard is 25 lengths clear of the field. 177 is going 177 miles an hour. Never lifts a single leg, goes straight through the first fence, and deposits Richard on the ground. But the great news here, Richard, we're going to let you talk in a second, is that Richard dusted himself off, like we'll see throughout the evening, dusted himself off, and became almost champion jockey twice, and had some great, exciting rides, and English Grand National. He's going to tell us about it. But without any further ado, Richard, take it away.
This time of night, we don't put jacket and tie on, so I apologise for my wear, having seen yourself there. But Robert, you were almost correct there. When Fred Winter said about 177, he was the only man who could hold the horse at home. The boss could hold him. And he said, you won't hold this horse, so what I want to suggest is that when you're at the starting tape, turn him round and face the wrong way. So I said, okay, that's what you want. Up went the tape, he went the jockeys, I turned round, and then you were correct. He just sighed through them as if they were butter. But yes, I had never ridden a winner, and it didn't look as though I was going to, because Fred Winter stood me down for 4 or 5 weeks there. He said, you learn by your mistakes. He was a great man. He's my hero. I really love the man, but, you know, you learn by your mistakes, and you certainly do. But anyway, life goes on. We loved it when Tommy arrived in the village. Lambourne is all horses, you know, 22 or 3 trainers there, flat and jumping. And Fred Winter started with only a handful of horses, and J. Trump was one of them. But when Tommy arrived in the village and then into the yard, there he was in a Stetson hat. He had leather like trouser things on.
Chaps. We call those chaps.
With little bits on the side. It was really fancy, you know. And he had big spurs where at the end of the spur was a circular thing with lots of you know, lots of sharp points on it. Well, Fred Winter went mad. You know, welcome to the yard, Tommy, but you've got to take those spurs off, see? So he really made a hit. It opened up the whole village. You know, it was a bit like Marilyn Monroe walking down the house in a bikini. You know, everyone was bemused by him. But he was a good guy, and he looked after J. Trump himself, although he was in the yard with the rest of us. He fed it, and the only thing he did was to start exercising with us in the spring, and then he decided he didn't want to do that. He did his own thing. But the interesting, he had a moral pestle, and when feed times, he'd be grinding away there, you know, with that pestle, and Fred Winter just looked down there and said, well, what's in there, Tommy? What do you give the horse? You wouldn't want to know. And that was 1964, so I don't think steroids had been invented in this country by then. Although I guess that's what they were. But, you know, great man, different. The horse was lovely. He won 2 Maryland Hunt Cups before coming over. And it was quite a feat then. And I think he arrived 6 months before the Aintree race, and we got him ready for others. And when he won his first race at Sandown Park, he had been working well at home, and we weren't surprised. But a lovely, handsome bay horse with a white star on his, you know, on his forehead. The pair of them were just made for it. I mean, it went downhill. Americans coming to the Grand National later when Charlie Penguin came over. But we'll stick with Tommy. His first win at Sandown was impressive. He won another couple of races. But the thing that really marked him out, Joe, as a good horse, he was second in the King George VI chase at Kempton Park on Boxing Day. Now that is the halfway stage of the season, and it's the highlight of the season. So for him to get that close, we knew he could go anywhere. Won another couple of races, and then when he went for the national, it was a magical thing. I mean, I went up there looking after another horse on the day, but it was just great to be a part of this. Well, it was a challenge which he rose to, and he conquered it.
So Richard, tell us, just to give us a little flavor of the Grand National, because we're going to watch it a little bit. I'll set it up for you, but there was a horse that Richard became associated with called Crisp, who came from Australia to America, ran in the Colonial Cup, which is very different than the English Grand National, and he finished about 5th. Then he goes over, and Richard, you connect with Crisp and win a 2-mile champion chase on him, set a course record. So this horse could flat motor. And then, unfortunately, you broke your ankle the next day, and so you missed the ride on him. 5 days later, he's going to win at Cheltenham without you. How did that make you feel, Richard?
Nobody likes to see someone else on their saddle. You know, it's my horse. I earned the right to ride him. I'm a stable jockey. That was mine. But I was pleased for the horse, the owner, and the trainer, Fred Winder, of course. But you know, the national, like the Maryland Hunt Cup, and like the Pardubice in Eastern Europe, they've all changed and had to because of public opinion. And in those days, the fences were made with the centres of them of 6-foot diameter posts drilled into the ground. A lot of them were living posts, and they were 3 or 4 in a row, and then they covered it with fir trees. So if you didn't, you could take the top off, but if you got 6 inches lower, you didn't win. You turned over. And in fact, I can't remember the name of the guy, but a great American rider, an amateur rider, came over, and there was 66 starters, I think, in the race.
Downey Bonsall, I believe. It was Downey Bonsall, whose family is here.
Yeah.
And,
well.
Yeah.
I believe that they had 3 people around the course ready to catch the horse if it was loose.
And Julie Adams actually rode too. But Richard, so let me set up real quickly. So Richard's going to ride Crisp in the Grand National. Was that 74?
Yeah.
74, I think.
73.
73. So he's going to ride Crisp in the Grand National. This horse can flat fly. So Richard, you'll tell us how it felt, but he opens up wider than any other horse has ever led the Grand National. I mean, is going the best, jumps the second last, flying. He's 35 lengths clear. He's going to win. They're already at home celebrating in Australia and everywhere else. And he jumps the last fence. He's still in front. He gets to the elbow. He's still 25 in front. He's going to win. And I can't remember what happened in the last 100 yards, the last 15 yards.
Yeah.
There was a horse, and I'll give you a hint. It's murder spelled backwards. Red rum. But anyway, Richard, tell us about how great it was. Just give us the early moments of you on Crisp.
Well, the horse, Joe, was a mammoth horse. He was 17 hands, maybe a bit more. His shoulder was deep shoulder, great big girth on him, and he had semi-floppy ears. You know, they were halfway cocked. They never did that. And he was strong, very strong, whatever you did. Now, in the Grand National, Fred Winter and I talked about it in depth, and he said, what do you want to do? You know, I had 12 stone, and Les Scargo, who was American-owned at the time,
Raymond Guest,
I can't remember them. But anyway, we were giving 2 stone away, almost to the pound, to everything else in the race. 44 runners, I think there were. So, being sensible, you'd say, well, let's hold him up. Let's conserve, and he's a 2-miler, over 4.5 miles. Let's conserve his energy. And I said, yeah, but you can't win if you don't get round. And if we're in behind, trying to settle, every time he sees a fence, he goes, wow, then get it, you know. And you would carve your way through them, and you'd be brought down, because you can't see over the first 3 fences. You can't see, so many horses, you can't see what falls in front of you, because there are 2 or 3 others pushing you out of the way. So he would not have got very far, because he'd have jumped on the back, he's so brave, of another horse. But we went round the inside, where the brave men went, because there are some sharp turns there, and you save a lot of ground, but you do take the risk. Beecher's Brook fence number 6, Joe, was 5'3" high, 4'6" thick, and then there was a drop of 8 feet on the landing side.
And 12 feet to the bottom of the, 12 feet to the bottom of the ditch.
Yeah,
From the top of the fence.
Yeah. And so when he got there, I was on the inside. There was one of the horse very somewhere on the wide outside, you know, where the fence is much easier. And we flew it as if it was a hurdle. And I thought, that'll do me. All we've got to do now is save stamina. But he cut the corner. The canal turn is as it says. You know, it is a right angled turn. So having all the luxury being in front, I could pull out and cut across the corner. Now, there are quite a few horses have been there and gone straight on at the canal turn, which is not a very good place to be, because the ground gets very heavy in the canals. And if you, in the days, the old days when I was around, horses had tubes in their necks. If a tubed horse went in there, it wouldn't get back out with blood. So anyway, Chris went round, got further and further ahead, but he didn't get really far until the chair, fence you just mentioned, I think, it's a big fence, and there was a little steward's wrought iron chair on a plinth beside it, and that's where they used to look out for dodgy jockeys, was their thing, I think. Anyway, brave sombrero fell there, and it left me 25 heads clear. And when I went round past the stands, jumped the water jump, the crowd went absolutely mad. You know, yeah, oh, it was brilliant. And as we turned away for the second circuit, I couldn't hear another horse. Nothing. Now you imagine a 44-horse race. Normally, shouting, roaring, galloping hooves, nothing. We didn't have big screens then, so I couldn't look up and see how we were going. But the horse jumped in front of Joe, and every time, you all have known it yourself, every time he jumped off, landed over the fence, he saw the next one and he couldn't wait to get at it. So there was no communication from the jockey, apart from just keeping him steady on an even keel. You know, he did what he wanted to. But again, Beecher's Brook second time, fine. Except there was a fallen jockey, rather pompous, who used to train afterwards, called David Nicholson, who was sitting on his horse, and the horse was at the butt end, he was eating grass, and he was known as the Duke because he was pompous, you see. And as I'm passing him, he shouted, "Hey, women!" He said, "Steady up, you're 29 and a half lengths clear, and you'll never get home." And so I thought, well, he's out there, out of the race. I'll do what I want in the race. I'm in charge, or half in charge. But anyway, so as you said, Joe, we went a long way clear. Couldn't hear another thing. Could then see the grandstand. Still over half a mile ago. Still couldn't hear anything. And then, you're right, after he jumped the second last, his stride started to go sideways instead of lovely forward movement. And even his half-cocked ears were down like that. That is going to the bottom of the barrel. You know, when you don't have enough strength to keep your ears pricked, it's not much. So then I could hear Red Run coming. I didn't know what it was at the time. And, you know, the horse's hoof beating. It was fast ground. So you could hear drum, 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 drum. And it was a high blow, the horse, Red Run. I could hear this too getting near. It was agony because we're starting to go up and down instead of in a straight line. But I made a boyish error which I have to live with. I thought I wasn't really waking up, but I picked a stick up to give him a whack round the backside after I landed over the last on my right hand, not thinking I got to go left to get round the elbow.
Oh.
Well,
So
17 hand horse, weighed 600 kgs. The moment I took my hand off, you know, to give him a whack, he was let loose, Joe, and he fell across not fell across, but he literally drifted across for two strikes and it went back. Then I got to the elbow, then I got to the rail. Go on, my son, keep kicking, and I could hear the hoof noise and getting closer and closer. But Fletcher, who rode Red Rum, was clever enough not to come and challenge me nearby. He went 10 lengths wide because he knew that coming to me, my horse so gutsy he would pick up. So, you know, people think jockeys have got no brains, but some of them do. Anyway, he was second. I'd been second a few years before on an outsider, which I believe was the best ride I ever gave a horse. It was trained by a woman called Barbara Lockhart Smith. Well, if I was being nice about her, I'd say she was a cow. When this horse was second, it had been useless before that. It was the best race of its life, and she tried to throttle me, saying, you know where you made a mistake? I said, well, I didn't make a mistake. And she was absolutely out of her brains. It's a grand place, a really lovely place that Charlie Fenwick knows, having won it. And there are a lot of jockeys, good jockeys, don't. There's John O'Neill, good trainer over here now, champion jockey many times, had 10 rides in the race and never got round, never completed. You know, it is a hard race to fathom. And it's not just you see, it's the other 40 odd horses that you've got to look out for. And of course, as you know, being a horseman, some of them wouldn't turn around and come back, they're coming back towards the field. It was like being in a war. Anyway, we're still here, that's how we still.
So Richard, tell me, so the week before the Grand National with Jay Trump, you had a cough in the barn. I mean, how serious was that? And how worried were you? You separated Jay Trump?
Yeah, he was taken out of the yard, as many people do if there's coughing. It was one of those things that came and it came a bit like you and having the flu. But he went there, having been second in the King George, having won 3 races. He went there with a huge chance, and Tommy gave him such a peach of a ride. I mean, he was in a duel with Fred, a horse called Freddie, who had been second the year before. It was a true run race, and a true warrior won the race. It was just the most magical thing. I mean, Fred Winter had only training barely a year when he won that. It was incredible.
And was Tommy, what was he like around the yard? Pretty serious guy?
Oh no, he was a joker, you know. We took the nicky out of him. You imagine cowboy coming in the yard with his shiny pointed spurs on, you know, we were being green colored. No, so we used to take, merciless, taking the mickey out of him, everyone. The lads who were never going to be jockeys didn't have anything to lose, so they would, you know, decimated. So he would be just as good at taking it out of us, you know, about various things about your personal body, you know. He settled in well. He didn't ride any of the other horses in the yard at all, just straight Jay Trump. Which, you know, was right. He wanted all his energy. He didn't want to go get hurt on someone else's horse and then have to send over for Charlie Fenwick coming in.
All right. Well, thank you, Richard. Does anybody have a quick question for Richard? We're allowed one question. Otherwise, Richard, you were amazing, and it's like beyond almost 1 o'clock in the morning. So we plan to do this every couple of weeks with you, Richard. Now that you've won this crowd over.
So we're going to show the race.
Oh, we're going to show the race. Oh, good.
Okay, so if
The
Richard wants,
second half.
yeah, Richard wants to stay on until while we show it. Okay.
Richard, you're either excused or you can stay on while we watch the race.
No, I definitely want to watch it.
Oh, great.
But thank you, Joe, for such a tender handling. You want me to do the commentary on it, Joe?
Yes, please.
No, you've got to be joking. Second circuit.
Yes.
Oh no, that's the start.
Okay, yeah, it's an edited version.
Yeah, okay. But look at that number of horses across the track. Such a thrill.
This 90 is
We're going to skip forward.
Richard,
Yes.
have you got final words for us?
Yeah, I thought that was a race beautifully executed. You know, to keep out of the way of all the other runners, you saw them line up, and to keep out of trouble, to jump as he did, and challenge, and he didn't lose his marbles. You know, he didn't go too soon, which is always something that goes wrong. If you go too soon, keep holding it. No, it was a copybook race. Just before I go, you know, you're doing your 3 Grand Nationals, but there were 2 others that were owned by Americans. Raymond Guest owned Lescargo. He was the American ambassador to Britain. And a lovely lady called Betty Moran won in 2020, I think it was, with Papillon. So, you know, you have a big history in our race, but we need a few more. You've gone quiet.
All right. Well, thank you, Richard. You were amazing. so back to my theme, and next we're going to talk about Billy Barton, and Charlie Fenwick is going to give us a little of that background and behind-the-scenes story. And before we get to Charlie, I just want to introduce him. And so we all think, again, back to my theme of, that it was always meant to be that Charlie, you think of him and he won 5 Maryland Hunt Cups and 10 Grand Nationals, and that was the way it was destined to be. But things weren't not so smooth early on for Charlie, like most other jockeys. But he could have gone this way, but he went that way. And he had just gotten going a little bit. He'd ridden a nice horse of Hugh O'Donovan's called Cafe, and that went pretty well, except that in the John Rush Street, you and Jay Griswold, one of our other speakers coming up, had a crushing fall in the John Rush Street on Cafe, but you both dusted yourselves off and moved on. And then Happy Orphan was the first horse, really live horse that you had, and that was really exciting. And Happy Orphan wins the Grand National, is going to be favored in the Hunt Cup, but gets a little bit of a cut on his stifle, so he doesn't run that year. But is really poised the next year when he comes back. And I may be wrong about this, but I have a vision of Ann on Nipper leading over the third fence. Ann Stewart on her hunter, Nipper, deciding that we needed to get this thing going and practice it. I can't remember if that was before or after. That was before. And I will give a shout out to Ann, who I had the pleasure of riding for, and I know was a big part of Ben's success. But there was that Stewart blood, which is here in the room tonight, there just is no one that had the determination and sense of just a tyranny of expectation with the horses. And when she was riding those horses at school, and nobody could school around that Grand National course like she could. And so shout out to her and Nipper, her fox hunter, leading Happy Orphan, who again did a tumultuous somersault with Charlie, but that didn't slow him down. And really, I've got to say that I was lucky enough I worked a little bit like Richard, only not the same, but I had the same lack of success in my first 60 rides. I'd ridden 3 or 4 years, and I finally went to work for Charlie, and it was a little bit of an inauspicious beginning. I shouldn't probably tell this because it's not about me, but just it's a little bit about Charlie. So I had stayed up a little too late the night before my first day at Charlie's, and I showed up a little bit late. I was supposed to be there at 6:30, and I got there at about 7, which was really bad on my first day. And Charlie had words for me, which helped me, and I think about it to this day. A note for me that said, "Joe, muck out." And I joined the muck crew, and it was instrumental in my early career. And so again, back to Charlie. So he's got this sense of grit and determination that I've always admired. But when you're successful as he is, and you're successful in business and riding, so you've got to be a little tough around the edges sometimes. And I have to quote Turney McKnight, who Charlie, you'll probably remember this, at your riding retirement dinner, Turney said, when you ride a race against Charlie, and he was in the car business at this time, he said, you ride a race against Charlie, you've got to really want to win that race if you're ever going to beat him. He said, similar when you go to the car dealership, you go to Charlie's dealership, and you want a car, you've got to really want that car. But anyway, Charlie's sense of determination and this story, well, we'll get to Ben Nevis later, but we're excited, Charlie, to hear the story of your grandfather's, Billy Barton, the sensation from Cuba. So we're going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Joe. So I'm going to talk a little bit about Billy Barton, who was owned by my grandfather, Howard Bruce, for whom my brother is named. And Howard Bruce lived over in Elkridge in Howard County. Wonderful farm there that we knew as kids. And he was a self-made man, took life pretty seriously, very seriously. And, but was a good guy, but he was a force to be reckoned with. He had become the master of the Elkridge Hounds, and he was presented with this horse, Billy Barton, who had several owners here. He had done quite well. He won 12 races on the flat. And when winter came in this part of the eastern part of the United States, racing stopped. And if you wanted to race, you had to go to New Orleans, Tijuana, or Havana. And Billy Barton went to Havana and won I don't know if it was the Cuban Derby or the Havana Derby, but he won a big 3-year-old race in Havana. And he was a legitimate force to be reckoned with as a racehorse. But as time went on, and we're getting into his 5- or 6-year-old year, he became, some would say, a rascal. Others said he was a rogue. And he would savage people. He refused to start. He tried to throw his jockeys off as they would go to the post. So eventually he was ruled off. And after that, Howard Bruce bought him for $2,000. That's the story. Probably was a lot of money back then. And this is in the 1923, 24, something like that. He hunts the horse. He's the field master, so he's in front. He hunts, and in one season, it is said that he hunted the horse 81 times. So the horse got out a lot. So we come to the spring of 1926, 100 years ago, exactly. And the horse makes his first timber start in the Grand National, which was down in Brooklynwood that time, and he wins. His second start is the Maryland Hunt Cup a week later, second start in his career as a timber horse, and he wins the Maryland Hunt Cup, a time of 9:09, which is a fine time. It was a record then, 21 starters in the race. He was really quite something. And then the next week they go down to the Virginia Gold Cup and win that. So his first 3 races were those 3 races. He's the only horse that ever won all 3 of those races in one year. He then comes back the next year, wins the Grand National, but has a fall, undescribed. We don't quite know too much about that fall, but he fell in the Maryland Hunt Cup. He then goes to England and for the Grand National in 1928. He has one race over there. They're not even sure. There was some question how fit he might have been. But he starts there in 28, and there are 42 runners in the race. And we'll see a bit of that race. But he was up front most all the way. He comes around to the last fence, and he's on the inside. There's a loose horse with the saddle has slipped to one side in the middle, and a horse named Tipperary Tim, who was one of those tubed horses we heard about. Tipperary Tim was 100 to 1 that day, and Billy Barton jumps the last fence, and facts are scarce here on exactly what happened, but somehow the jockey fell off. The horse may have fallen on the ground. Somebody comes running out of the stands, gives the jockey a leg up, and he finishes second and last. Of the 42 starters, only 2 finished the race. So he then comes back to the United States, and then in 29 he goes back to England, and in March of 1929 he is brought down at the chair by a loose horse, and 50 years later, in March of 1979, Howard Bruce's grandson was brought down by a loose horse at the chair. Things happen. So anyway, he was and you will see here, all this got him on the cover of Time magazine just before the race in 1929. So he was a horse of real significance at that time. So maybe we're going to, I think, try to watch the second half of this race.
This is silent, there's no.
Charlie, you're gonna call the race.
So while we're waiting for this, the last race he ran was actually May of 23 at Pimlico, and he was lined up at the start. They didn't have the starting gate at that time, and he turned around and bolted 4 furlongs the wrong direction. And that was when they said, okay, no mas. Yeah.
No sound here.
Wow.
What year is this?
This is
1928.
28.
We got some.
So
Shows you how they jump features programs.
they're slow motion.
Our unique stop slow. Oh, look at that.
Does it feel like that when you jump it, Charlie?
Not everybody comes to the same.
And then if you're back,
It's incredible.
so Charlie, tell everybody about up until recently when the jumps have changed quite a bit. During the time of these 3 horses anyway, if you had a Maryland timber horse, the thought was, Charlie, take it away.
If you had a Maryland timber horse, a horse that had been comfortable running around the Grand National and the Maryland Hunt Cup here, he was very much you had to think he was an Aintree kind of horse. There was no reason not to. And I can remember Bruce and I in Eddie Morgan's bedroom. Eddie Morgan lived above Bobby Fenwick's house, and he had had a stroke, but he also had a shortwave radio, and somehow we were able to connect to the BBC, I guess it was, in England. Bruce and I listened to Jay Trump win that race. There. Now there you see, there's...
But Charlie, you jumped around.
There's a poor horse blowing my head. And nothing but loose horses there. So.
But
Yeah,
Charlie,
you can see here, this horse coming in, that's temporary Tim coming in, and if you, there's a video, you can see his breath coming out of his neck.
so you were allowed to do a tracheotomy on a horse in England up until maybe 20 years ago, and you'd unscrew a cap, and you can see it now. And so at the start, they would just take the cap off, and the horse would blow. It's illegal now. But what I'm saying is that so Charlie and Tommy Smith jumped around the inside. If you had a Maryland Hunt Cup horse, it was bigger, but all the riffraff went to the outside. And so you could be in the hunt if you had a Maryland Hunt Cup horse and could just pick your way around the inside. You weren't, the riffraff was going
More
more.
on the outside, because it wasn't as, it was stiffer on the inside. But I gotta go back to the Jay Trump thing. He set the mold for certainly for Bruce and me. We I don't know if idolize is quite the word, but we certainly had tremendous respect for Tommy and what he did, and I don't think I would have ever done anything without the image of example of what he said and what he did. It was really quite something. And others had made efforts to go over and have done so far. I don't think it's going to be, the race is so different now that it doesn't lend itself to a Hunt Cup horse any longer. It's a faster race. The horses are not as stiff and as big as they were. It's still long, but it's
And they have a rating system now, because I've looked looked into this last year and threatened that actually the U.S. government was so disappointed they weren't inviting Maryland Hunt Cup horses that we wouldn't help them if they were ever attacked in war again. And the British Jockey Club was not amused with that line of thinking. But anyway, so there was a time when you were automatically nominated if you won the Maryland Hunt Cup, you could go to the Grand National. But now it's based on a rating system, and so you have to be 150. So a former winner 2 years ago couldn't even run back in the Grand National because his rating fell below the minimum.
Yeah, and you had to run over there at least 3 times, or win a race, or run 3 times to get a rating.
Yeah.
So it doesn't lend itself to that happening.
All the races are rated. I mean,
Yeah.
everything's rated over there.
Yeah.
They don't have claiming races.
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Carl.
Charlie,
Okay, so moving right along, I'm going to introduce Jay Griswold. And Jay is from a storied family and rode against Charlie a lot and has certainly been involved in Maryland timber racing and has been a great spirit and was a great amateur jockey. And he has this marvelous twinkle in his eye, which you'll see in a minute, and sort of an aristocratic Green Spring Elkridge drawl. I don't know what you say. But he'll sort of, and he can charm, you know, he's so diplomatic, he can tell you to go to hell and make you look forward to the trip. And he did that with me. My first real encounter with Jay was he called me, and this was about 1982, and he says, Joe, you know, I have a horse that, you know, a greenhorn Yahoo like you might just suit. And maybe you'd like to ride him over timber for me on Sunday at the Andrews Bridge point-to-point. And I said, oh, that sounds great. I went to my mentor, Charlie, and said, is this a good idea? He said, oh, it's a great idea, Joe. So I climbed aboard the good horse Tiger's Houdini, and things were going great until I got to the last fence. And I'm sure it was my fault, and somehow we miscued, and he just pile drove me into the ground like a steak. And I became his 4th collarbone victim, which I learned later. The Tiger's Houdini had actually done that to 3 other jockeys. But anyway, Jay, I forgive you for that, and I'm sure you forgive me for throwing him to the ground. And I can't wait to hear what you have to say about Ben Nevis. So if you don't mind sneaking up here. And then we're going to watch that film of Ben Nevis.
Thank you, Joe.
That's all.
Well, Joe, if bullshit were concrete,
Oh,
you'd be-
you can't keep saying that, Jay.
That's why we hired him. That's why we hired him.
because it's true.
Bitterness, Jay.
There's a quote on the front page of the Horse and Hound magazine that you all see every time. And it's written by somebody called White Melville, whoever he was. Richard Pippin probably would know. And he says, the best of my fun I owe to Horse and Hound. And you all think about that. It's really true. I mean, it's really true. And as Joe says, the outcomes are not always as planned. It's nice when it does work out, but most of the time it probably doesn't work out. And so you do have to have a little bit of a sense of humor about it and have fun with it. I mean, I can't imagine people that do it that don't have any fun. Why in the world would you do it? It makes no sense. But so Ben Nevis was, and Charlie, thank you for asking me to do this. And I'm reaching back practically 50 years ago. He was 32 and I was 36. And I was skiing with my family, but I said, I missed 79, God damn it, I wasn't going to miss 1980. And thank God I went over in 80 instead of 79. But I just do remember, Ben Nevis was a failed pointer that a man named Michael Bannister lived up in Yorkshire, whose son actually became a very good friend. And Bobby Fenwick and Redmond Stewart were over there grouse hunting, I guess. And Mr. Stewart wanted to buy a horse, and they're all sitting around the table at night. And Michael says, I got one in the field here. So Mr. Stewart didn't wake up in time to see it in the morning. So Bobby Fenwick goes out there, sees the horse in the field, throws a stone at him, he gallops around the field. Bobby says he'll do, right? Isn't that a true story? So his provenance was not great. So, but he shows up, and the Stewarts had a wonderful guy working for him at the time, Josh Gill, and I remember Josh telling me, you know, you wouldn't believe what happened. We get Ben Nevis over here, and Charlie jumps on me, and he flips over backwards. That was the first event, right? That was the first indication that Ben Nevis had talent. but he obviously, when it came around to running in the springtime here, he was very successful and won a number of races, and obviously had every reason in the world to go to England to try it at the Grand National. And so let's see, 1978, you correct me if I'm wrong on some of these dates, it's the best I could do, but 1978, Charlie and Ann, my wife and I, had two sons the same age, and we got a house that summer in Northeast Harbor, Maine. And so the first thing that happens is little Charlie and Jason decide that they're going to take some Spider-Man vitamins and be, you know, really pretty tough. I'm told by my son that your son encouraged them to split the bottle. Each had half a bottle of Spider-Man vitamins. We were all out for dinner, and they had to be carted off to the hospital and read them. But I do remember that, and then they said, well, they're going to England that fall and going to live there for a year and give the Grand National a go in 1979. And so that ended at the chair, as you said, and 50 years after your grandfather's horse had the same issue. So along comes 1980, and a few of us went over, not as many as 79, because it wasn't as big a deal, I guess. Everybody thought that, well, God, the horse will just fall again, and why would we be interested in that? So I fortunately, let's see, I left Baltimore on a Wednesday night, got there Thursday. Wallace Lanahan had thrown a big dinner together at the Berkeley Hotel, and your mother and father and everybody, Squeaky and everybody was there. I mean, it was fantastic. And then we all jump in a car, drive to Liverpool, and it was just very relaxed. It was like popping to the Rappahannock Point to Point. I mean, it wasn't any big deal, really, because nobody thought he had a snowball chance in hell. He was 45-1, and so I see Helen Bonsall there, and Frank and I in those years were going to England quite a bit, and you know, separating the English from some of their pounds. So, but Frank wasn't on this trip. He was on a lot of other ones. But so we're driving up the road to Liverpool, and we get there. We check into a place called the Red Rum Hotel in Southport, wasn't it? Southport. And it wasn't, you know, was not a big deal. But the next day, you and I go for a jog in the morning, I remember, on the beach, Southport's right there on the beach above Liverpool. And, you know, we're all very relaxed. We drive over to the race, and you do your weighing in, and Johnny Shaw was there. Who else was there? Wallace. And Wallace, those of you that know Wallace, he was a big bettor. I mean, a serious gambler. And you said it was 1,000. I think it might have been closer to 10,000. On the nose, 45 to 1. Now, you can't see a goddamn thing. Dense fog, rain, hock deep. It was just horrible, horrible. And, you know, you sort of figure, thousands and thousands of people. What are we doing here? And a terrible old stand, rickety old stand, that's about to fall down, and nothing, you couldn't see anything. So you could see the chairs in front of the stands, you could see that, and so Ben Nevis is.
Just gonna give you a little, so you don't have to hold this, Jay.
What?
I think everybody can hear you, I'm just gonna set this
Okay.
up. I think you're getting,
Am I getting fake?
no, you're fine. I'm
All right.
just getting it off
So,
your head.
you interrupted my train of
Oh,
thought.
sorry.
Wallace Lanahan, $10,000.
Yeah.
$10,000.
Bags
No.
of money.
And incidentally, while I'm thinking about it, Cricket, you do an amazing job. What this lady has done with this place.
I did not interrupt your train of thought.
Pretty amazing.
I appreciate that, but keep
No,
going.
it's true. It's all true. Everything I say is true. Everything Bill says is not true. But so anyhow, the start happens, and we're all in this rickety old stand, and we do see him. He's next to last, jumping the chair, and he's taken what his great buddy Graham Thorner, who was just a retiring jockey at the time, and was supposed to ride in the race. And he told me he was supposed to ride, he was retiring, but he was supposed to ride this horse. And he said, Jay, he cannot jump more than 2.5 feet. I said, that doesn't sound good. He said, but this guy that owns the horse is named Lord Leverhulme. And he said, you don't know Lord Leverhulme. He wants the horse to run the Grand National. I said, I have an uncle exactly like that. he would do very, very well in England. But anyhow, so then you go jump the chair, and then you go left-handed, go down the whatever that is, the front side, and you know, he obviously, the horse is such a good jumper that he jumps his way, and basically he's second. You could hear it. You couldn't see anything, but you could hear it over the loudspeaker. So then he's head and head with a horse called Delmos at the Canal Turn, right? At Beecher's. And so just before they turn to come back towards the stand. So, and they're probably 20 lengths in front of everybody else. And we could hear this, we couldn't see anything. So then Delmos falls. So Charlie and Ben Nevis are out there by themselves in front in the English Grand National, just have to stay. And then they come out of the fog, and you could see him coming out of the fog, and he was floundering a bit, but he got the job done. And I mean, we went nuts. And the whole crowd, you can't imagine the people that are there, and the enthusiasm, and the, you know, so, I mean, it was just unbelievable. So we go from the rickety old stand down to the winner's circle. Congratulations, everybody. Everybody's overjoyed, crying and screaming and yelling. You might see on the picture, you can hear Ann screaming in the background. And Wallace Lanahan, who had made this very large bet, goes for his pocket to find his I didn't realize his brother, Jack, was quite a fancy attorney in London, and he got it sorted out, and the thieves were apprehended.
Well, I think Jack made the bet
Or
and
Jack,
took a Xerox copy of the check.
Gotcha.
He had that in his office in London, and then they went to Ladbrokes on Monday. And
Yeah.
Ladbrokes said, "We've been waiting for this ticket, we've known it's out there."
exactly.
And the thief probably said it was too valuable for him to hand in.
Right. There you go. Well, Wallace, I mean, that really got Wallace hooked on the sport of steeplechase. But it was the most unbelievable experience. Then, so the police said, you gotta get a police escort out of here. Seriously, because there's so many people that want to talk to you and everything. So we jumped in the car and they said, furthermore, get out of the hotel, get out of town as fast as you possibly can. And because the Irish are so furious, they'll burn the hotel down. Remember that? Really? I mean, you know, they were serious. So a number of us jumped in a car. Johnny Shaw, Graham Thorner, a few other people, and we drive from Liverpool to Burford. And I don't know if you all know England, but that's about a 6-hour drive. So we get to this place in Burford, called the Gateway to the Cotswolds. And it's about midnight, we go back in there, and we're said that they'd bring us a little food. They didn't know who we were, just vagrants coming in there. Then they realized who we were. Oh my God, then the whole town shows up. And Graham Thorner, your buddy, left, we left, never went to bed that night. And I really do remember this very distinctly, that Graham Thorner didn't have a stitch of clothes on, running all around, and we're all screaming and yelling, drunk and whatever. And I had to wake up that morning and catch a plane back home. So I missed all the parade and all the fun stuff. After, you tell them about that.
So,
Sorry.
Want to show the race?
Yeah, you want to show the race first?
Yeah.
let's show it.
What's that? Let's go show the race.
We're still improving steadily on Vienna, but it's still lost from Ben Nevis and Prince Rock, all over that safely, then Miles Stewart and 3 to 1. Del Moss over the 18th in the lead, from Ben Nevis going smoothly in second place, then Miles Stewart 3 to 1, Zambia and Prince Rock. Then comes the Bill Garnick as they come to the 19th year of ditch. Del Moss over first from Ben Nevis, then 3 to 1, and Ross Stewart, Zambia and Pound over there, the red Pablo has gone, Castellano has gone. Virtually refused, Samuel has refused, and as they come the next Del Moss in the lead, now for Julie Wilson.
And Del Moss backs again, but he gets away with it. He's over 3 to 1. He made a mistake, and Charlie Penny having a terrific ride on Ben Nevis in second place now. With Del Moss from Ben Nevis. Behind the blue leaders is 3 to 1. Then weakening is Rathbank behind that, and over 1 Beatrice 3 to 1 makes another mistake. But all the leaders over it as they run down the Beatrice for the second time. Del Moss, the leader from Ben Nevis in second place. Then comes 3 to 1. Ross Stewart on the outside. Then the Bill Garnick as they come to Beatrice. And Beatrice. Over it. Ben Nevis. 3 to 1. 3 to 1 as far as well. Robin Thomas over it in third place. Then comes the Bill Garnick.
Charlie had this one together with watch this on the inner car back there. All of a sudden, Ben Nevis picks up the bit, and he's racing this truck. Seriously, he's racing the truck.
Then Rathbank looks very tired, then along comes back to the fashion boy.
really what's left in it. But Ben Nevis from Rough and Tumble, then comes the Bilbali side, Royal Stewart fourth, and then going to be the rest of it.
So it's the 32-year-old American banker, Charlie Fanning, on Van Davis, 15 lengths clear of the British champion, John Franklin. Rough and Tumble with a gap then to the Bill Garlic in third place. So these three look virtually the only ones. Royal Stewart is a long way back in fourth place. There are two fences now between the winning post and history for Charlie Fanning now, coming down to the second last race on Ben Nevis. This 32-year-old American banker comes to jump the second last race. Rough and Tumble is getting closer to him. So it's Charlie Fanning now from John Franklin, Ben Nevis from Rough and Tumble. These two only in the national as they come to the final fence. Ben Nevis about 4 lengths clear of Rough and Tumble. Rough and Tumble on the
He said, "That's the best investment idea Alex Grant's had since the war."
Okay, we'll do, we're almost out of time, but we hope you all have enjoyed that. And if anybody will take a question or two from the crowd, or we'll happily dismiss you.
Sorry,
Don't have a question.
sorry, I was doing
Go
some
ahead.
research on this last week to put in my little Facebook post, and every horse that I read about, they were all bad. They bucked people off. They wouldn't hunt. They had to be up front. They were notorious for not being schooled out, whatever, shut out of the race because they were bad hunters. Is this how you win the hunt company?
Well, Jay Trump was pretty darn nice, and
He was not a good hunter, not a good racehorse either. He was in Charlestown.
Right,
Charlestown.
right.
He's all bad actors, is what I read.
Battleship was by Man of War. Also, it was a Scots horse. Wasn't a Maryland Hunt Cup horse, but he was an extremely well-bred horse that won the Grand National.
One interesting thing I read about Billy Barton was Albert Ober went to Gilman and Princeton, not unlike Benny Griswold here, and you know, rode Billy Barton and had all this great success, and ended up on a sailboat off of Block Island and was swept overboard and never found. So sailing is far more dangerous. Don't get in the boat. If anybody offers you a ride on one of these horses, take it. Don't go sailing. That was the message there. Charlie, I wanted to ask you a quick question about Ben Nevis. So, I mean, when he first got there the first year, it did not go well. You got a fall in your first run.
No.
In England.
Oh, in England. I thought you were here in the United States. Yes.
But you were questioning my command of the facts.
No, that was a, not Newton Abbott, but down that way. And yes, it was a 2-mile race, and we were having trouble finding the right race. 2 miles probably wanted to go longer, but we were head-to-head at the last, and he fell on the ground. Yes.
And also, you and Tim Forster early on had a little bit of a disagreement. You all were there, you're ready to ready to run. He said, the ground's too hard, you can't go. And said, give us that breakfast scene. Because Graham describes it like he said, I'm gonna leave the area.
Yeah.
Just Shirley's the American amateur rider. And I'm gonna let you train the horse. I'm not gonna interfere, but
I'm living right here.
I'm living here and we're not running, and weeks are going by, and you got the kids in school, and it's time to get on.
Ann and I had rehearsed how we were going to approach him that morning at breakfast, and so we started the conversation, and something to the effect, we got to pick it up, Tim. We got to get going. We got to run, and he went ballistic. I do remember. Okay, go ahead, bring him down. Okay. And I remember Thorner just sort of backed away in the corner, and we had this dialogue. Because we did think the going was great. The turf's always nice over there, and we needed to get on with it. We had to get handicapped. It was a complicated, and Tim didn't really understand. Not that we did understand, but we understood it better than he did. What we needed to get done, so we didn't carry top weight in the race. We needed to get handicapped.
What weight did he carry?
Pardon? What weight did you eventually carry?
The first year was like 57, and then it was, the second year was like 152 or something like that.
Okay.
But one of my compliments to Charlie is that things did not go well that first year. Besides getting brought down to the chair, they bought a couple of horses. You had Peter Thompson. You bought one that you said was so fat it couldn't get out of its own way.
Hovis.
Hovis.
We sort of
Paid too much money for it.
One of the Weatherby's. We got it from, you remember? A Weatherby.
That's
No, this was Hovis, and he was so big and fat that, and he was getting fit, but he didn't look
So
like.
Charlie's going to ride some other races to get fit,
to
get some action, which Tommy Smith didn't do.
No,
but it's advised.
And we were looking for it, but Forster was so embarrassed by the horse that we would take him to the paddock, and he'd be tacked up, and he'd have these sheets all over him, and he would never pull the sheet off the horse while he was in the paddock, and then put the sheet off.
And then one other thing I liked was, so things weren't going that well, and Ben wasn't really running that well, but you got an opportunity to go to Ireland and ride Bright Highway for George.
Yes.
In a flat race, and so that looked good. Big field, they line up to start. It's the bright sun,
Yes.
and he was a free running thing. So Charlie pops off in the lead, and he's 15, 20 clear, and doesn't hear anything. And it suddenly occurs to him, everything's gone wrong with Ben Nevis. Here he is in Ireland on the favorite. It suddenly occurs to him, maybe they're all waiting back at the start, and I'm the only one in the whole race course, and I've just blown it, and I'm now the idiot that's out there.
But it's just horrible. It's horrible. And I was trying to make it as slow as I could, so maybe I could hear something.
Because you don't want to turn around.
And you're going at the sun, so you couldn't see any shadows. And the grandstand was right. We went right by the grandstand, so the whole world would see if you turned around. It was just horrible.
But one other thing. So then the race comes up, and it's Ben Nevis has performed to the highest possible level at the Maryland Hunt Cup on the rock hard ground. I mean, it is ridiculous. And most of the runs he had were on that hard ground. So they just assumed that, we don't get a lot of soft ground, or some years, but rare. And they just assumed. And so as you come into the Grand National the second year, it is just torrential rain after rain after rain. And you almost think, geez, should we even bother running this horse? So tell us
I remember jogging on the beach and saying to Jay, if it wasn't all these circumstances, this horse really shouldn't be running here.
Yeah.
And you can see this video of they going into the beach for the second time with standing water, with splashing water, galloping through splashing water. So it was very, he didn't care what it was. He was going to perform his best if it was hard or soft. We always thought, because he did so well on hard, he wants hard ground. He didn't care.
Charlie, when you popped up the lead all by yourself for 20 in front of everybody, how did you keep him interested?
Well, that was good question, because in the United States, he was always in front, always in front. But he'd never been in front in England. I mean, it'd been years since he'd been in front. So we jumped features, and you could, if you look at it, you can see he's kind of looking around what's going on. And Joe kind of mentioned this, that we jumped the canal turn, and then we got about 5 fences in a row, and there is this, we're going here, and right where Jay is standing, on the other side of the railing is a paved road, and there's a camera truck on the paved road, and you saw us, and it's looking right at us as we're going down. And he was picking up the bit versus the truck. And the truck kind of got him back into the game. I sort of felt like he could, because before we got around the canal turn, he was looking all over the place, and really, I mean, there's no sense in going home. We're fine.
Charlie, one quick question. So John Frankham, who I think is the best steeplechase jockey of all time, he was second. There's the truck. So John Frankham's second, just added.
That's the truck, and this is the canal turn. And you see, there's the road.
Did you have any conversation?
Yeah, now here's the, we didn't have any conversation. But Ben has picked up, he's now hearing the truck.
That's the view from the truck, yeah.
And seeing it's something to run with.
But did Frankham ever say, hey, I thought you were going to come back, or I thought for a minute I was going to catch you, or
No.
it never seemed?
No, he's a wonderful guy, and we went back to the Cotswold Gateway for dinner that night, and Frankham ended up having dinner at the table next to us that night. It was a surreal night, too. A bunch of people came from Lambourne up there and joined us there for dinner.
And why did you pick the Cotswolds?
That was
Half.
They told us to get as far away. I mean, seriously, they said the Irish will burn the hotel down. That must be relations of Georgians, don't you?
They're really disparaging the Irish.
All right, well, Shirley, if you have
Thank you
nothing
all.
more, thank you all for commenting. One quick thing before you go. Cricket's going to say a quick word. And also, the statue of Billy Barton is at Laurel. So my stepfather, John